All right, this is definitely the last lesson for ancient Greece. And I'm hoping this will be a much shorter one because we just have one thing to talk about, although it is a very important thing to talk about, and that is Hellenization. So just in your notes at least, and just getting down, Hellenization is just the term we use for the spreading of Greek culture. So in the last lesson, we were talking about how, oh, this will go backwards. We were talking about how basically Alexander, yeah, I went far too far. Sorry about this. Alexander basically took the Persian Empire, turned it into his empire. Now that's huge. That's big. He's called the Great for like he deserves it for basically his accomplishments in life and the relatively short life that he had. But one of his greatest accomplishments, and not really sure if he knew he was doing this or if he actually had a good idea of what he was doing, you can debate that either way. But everywhere he goes to, so everywhere that is, you could say, like green on that map, he spreads Greek culture to. So when we say Greek culture, we're talking about Greek learning. So their way of writing, their way of reading. So Greek writing, Greek reading, Greek language. Like basically Greek becomes almost this universal language. Like everybody speaks it. If you don't speak it as a first language, you speak it as a second language. Across that whole area, we usually don't. A lot of times we think of ancient Greece, we think, oh yeah, they spoke Greece in places like definitely Greece, but Egypt and Asia Minor and a little bit of the Middle East. But they didn't speak Greek all the way out in India. But yeah, they did. Alexander got Greek and Greek culture all the way to basically India. And one of the more very established Greek kingdoms for a long time was a kingdom called Bactria, which was this area right here. Um, Lots of Greek libraries, lots of Greek buildings and statues and things like that were built out there. Um, some of that stuff is still there, although unfortunately, with the wars over the last 20 years, groups like the Taliban have not been, well, very nice to anything that they don't like. And actually, a lot of that ancient Greek stuff has been destroyed or tried in a way trying to be erased out there. But just know, very Greek, even all the way out there in Central Asia. So what this does when we talk about Hellenization is it brings kind of everybody together in a way where now you feel like you can communicate with others. You have something a little bit in common. You're able to learn and understand things on some common ground. Yes, you still have very different cultures overall, like say Babylonian culture or Jewish culture or Egyptian culture versus Greek culture in general, but now you have some connective glue with everything. The world becomes much more of a connected place because of this Hellenization. Whether Alexander the Great again meant to do this or not, doesn't matter because it happened. All of a sudden, you could see Greek plays everywhere. Uh, well, going to like the religion of Christianity, if I'm getting this right, like the New Testament of the Bible was written in Greek first, not Hebrew, as far as I understand. Maybe it was second, but I believe it was actually written in Greek first because it was just more of a knowledgeable language at that point to everybody. Um, anyways, this is big. Basically, like it says there, language, religion, ideals, medicine, like from the philosophers that we talked about 2 lessons ago. This all spreads everywhere. The picture I'm showing off to the right, that's, oh God, I believe that's an Ephesus. I could be wrong. I'd be looking my stuff up again. But it's a famous Greek amphitheater that still is basically in existence, and basically it's not in mainland Greece. It's in Asia Minor. You could find amphitheaters like this all over what is basically the former empire of Alexander the Great. Um, by the way, the Romans do this as well later on, but the Greeks, you could say, are the first to get this on the Western idea of things where they spread their culture everywhere and glue everybody together. So even though there might not be political ties, like the separation of Alexander's empire into 3 separate parts, the Seleucid, Antigonid, and Ptolemaic empires, they still have this connection culturally between everybody, even with all the separate cultures in there. And you could say one of the first, I shouldn't say, the Persians actually had a good example of multiculturalism, but the Greeks more so had a good thing going when it came to multiculturalism, as in where people were getting along with each other, even if they came from different cultures. It wasn't perfect, but is one of the first times in history we see that on a large scale. So we love to look at this and what Alexander does with Hellenization, whether you meant to again or not, to things like Westernization today or Americanization today. Westernization meaning, well, the spreading of just Western thought and culture around the world that we saw a lot after the Renaissance and especially with the Age of Exploration. Basically, about the last 500 years, you've had this spreading out of Western ideals. And if you don't know what I mean by Western, I'm talking about Europe, basically. Europe, which then becomes the Americas and then spreads out from there. Then we talk about Americanization. This idea that America, especially after the fall of definitely after World War II, but especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, a lot of countries have been very influenced by American ways of doing things. And so they call that Americanization. Not everywhere is happy about it. Like you go to a country like Iran and they hate Barbie dolls and stuff like that. So they come out with their own versions of it, but that's the whole idea. They come out with their own version of a doll that is acceptable in their culture, but still the idea came from America. And McDonald's everywhere, Levi's jeans everywhere, and stuff like that. That's basically what happened with ancient Greek Hellenization as well. And one of the big ones today is the language of English, which can't really hold that to the United States. Even the United States would hold its main language, English, to, well, the British Empire, the English themselves, who, because of their empire that covered a quarter of the world and the spreading out of westernized ideals under the British Empire, and then you have the French Empire and things like that, but at least language-wise, British Empire, it is the most spoken language in the world today. English is. Not as a first language, but as the most spoken language across the board as a first, second, or third language, that type of thing. As part of this westernization that has happened over the last couple hundred years, especially the last 200 years. So we can look at what happened with the Greeks and we can compare that to what's happening now and just see the positives and negatives, weigh those positives, negatives, and the pros and cons and just see how it's going. Anyways, there's a lot of similarities. There's some things that are different. Technology has definitely changed that a lot today versus the way things were way back then. You could say that we're actually much more cohesive and kind of like melding cultures together today because of the technology and communications, internet. Like the idea of you watching this video right now, and you could technically watch it over in Japan or something like that if you had access to the link. That's a big deal, and that does meld people together a bit. So I'm not going to go too far down that road. I did say this was going to be a short video. I hope I got this in your minds good, this idea of Hellenization and how very important it is, because Hellenization is going to play a big role in, well, our next unit, that of Rome. They also get a bit Hellenized over time. Now you can say from the very beginning. And with that, that is the end of our unit on ancient Greece.